The Game Boy Advance SP was one of the most influential handhelds ever made, and it complemented a massive library of games. So recently I bought an SP and started a small collection of games that consisted of personal favorites and certified classics that I had yet to play on the handheld. However, I quickly realized that the Game Boy Advance SP, at least in its original form, is no longer the best way to play its catalog of game releases. Compared to what's possible with modern backlit displays, the handheld's frontlit screen produces washed out colors and overall a lackluster image that can be hard to read, even in the proper lighting conditions. So I made a few changes. Hey, I'm Alex Van Aken from Game Informer, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing how I modded my Game Boy Advance SP with a new shell, IPS screen, and a brightness adjustment setting, all without burning my house down. It should be said, I am not an expert. This is not meant to be a formal how-to video, more so just documenting my experience as a first-time modder with my own custom Game Boy Advance SP. If you're looking for an in-depth tutorial from an expert, go check out my friend Joe Bleeps, creator of the Neon Advance, and has his own YouTube channel that I'll be sure to link down in the description below. So I'm using the IPS screen version 2. From FunnyPlaying. I got it on eBay for about $55. The shell was about $25 with shipping. Through eBay, I just looked for the Super Famicom shell. And then everything else I needed was pulled from my original Game Boy Advance SP. I took the hinges, the motherboard, and the original speaker, combined with my new parts to complete this mod. So let's get started. We're going to start by removing the screws that are holding the shell together and removing the battery. Then I pull off the shell and expose the motherboard, and there are 3 screws securing that to the other side of the shell. So we just quickly remove those. And then there's this ribbon cable we have to remove. Just make sure to pull out the tabs to release it. And there, it should be removed pretty easily. So we pulled out the speaker, and we're gonna also pull out all the other buttons. Pretty much you just wanna empty the shell and keep the pieces in case you need them later. Next are these rubberized cap heads that cover a lot of the screws that are on the front-facing edges of the console. So we're going to remove those. They can be a little hard to remove because they are glued on, which also makes unscrewing the screws behind them even harder. I thought at one point my screws were stripped. It turns out there was just a lot of glue to keep them together. So let's remove the top half of our clamshell and expose the screen. So now we're just gonna bring that ribbon cable out, but first there's a screw in here that we need to undo, which will then release the front side of the hinge. And then the ribbon cable and the screen should come off really easily now. So make sure to set that to the side. You can repurpose it for other builds in the future, or, sell it on eBay. Honestly, for a 20-year-old console, the screen's in pretty good condition, but I mean, compared to the new IPS screen from FunnyPlaying, it's no comparison really. So this is by far the most annoying part of this build. It's the hinges. Now you can buy hinges if you want for like $2 off of retromodding.com. I kind of recommend that versus trying to pull them out of your old shell, but I did it anyway. So there are these rubberized tabs that are kind of holding in the hinge, and you have to pull those back with your screwdriver and then push with a lot of force to get them out of there. And eventually they will pop out. You might have to struggle, but this is the old shell, so don't really worry about breaking the plastic too much. Now that we've removed the hinges, it's time to put them into our new shell. And I actually was an idiot and didn't realize that there is a left hinge and a right hinge. And I mixed them up and it caused me a lot of problems. They were not fitting into my new case. Oh man, I pulled out an X-Acto knife and started peeling back pieces of the plastic to try to get it to fit. I tried everything and it turns out, yeah, I'm just dumb. And there's a left hinge and a right hinge. So after I pulled apart the entire build, I realized this and decided to reassemble. So just line up the tabs inside and they should click right into place. Yeah, don't spend 45 minutes like I did trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's just not gonna work. So now that we've assembled our new shell with its hinges, we're gonna start working on the new IPS screen. So I recommend using some double-sided tape and securing the ribbon cable to the back side of the screen. It might be obvious, but make sure there are no smudges on your screen when you put it into the case. It might be hard to reach later on. You don't want little smudges in the corners of your screen that are going to be difficult to get out later. This little piece of foam is just going to help us to keep things from moving around in the shell and keep everything nice and secure. You might need to trim it to fit your screen, but just pull the scissors out and go to work. Now next we're going to thread the ribbon cable with a single spiral through the hinges. Now here's where I ran into another annoying problem. It was an easy fix, but time consuming. These cases are not manufactured specifically for this IPS screen, so in many cases, you have to remove this piece of plastic that blocks the case from closing. So just take an X-Acto knife, take some scissors or some really old and rusty wire cutters, and you should be good to go. Now next comes the fun part. We're going to start reassembling the motherboard, but it was easier for me to just put on the back of the top clamshell so that I didn't have to worry about the screen falling out. And make sure that your ribbon cable is secured on the other side so it doesn't accidentally fall back into the hinge. Now this is the part where I reattach the ribbon cable to the motherboard, and actually I would wait because I realized that it made things really awkward. There's a couple screws that you have to reassemble, like the front hinge cover, and I'd recommend just waiting to put the ribbon cable back together. And if you're willing to solder a cable, not only do you get the really rich colors of the IPS screen and the awesome viewing angles, you also get access to a brightness setting. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're going to conquer our fears and solder this wire. If you're following along at home or taking notes, we're going to solder this wire to the connector at Q128. Now, of course, you're gonna need flux, you're going to need your solder, and your soldering iron. So after we've added flux to our connection points, we're going to heat up the solder and bond the wire to the motherboard. Yes, I know for the past 30 seconds I have called it solder and not solder. All of my high school bullies are going to come at me in the comments. Listen, it's not my fault that all of the retro modding YouTubers I watch are European, okay? Alright, so we're going to take the other end of the wire and solder that onto the ribbon cable. And once that's done, reinsert the ribbon cable back into its housing. Now we've got to insert all of the relevant buttons onto the faceplate of the Game Boy. Now it's time to secure the motherboard to the back of the faceplate. We'll just resecure those 3 screws that we loosened earlier. Before completely closing up, don't forget to add the nut back to the shell that's used to secure the battery door. And if you haven't, secure the plastic power tab to the shell. Next, we're going to click both sides of the Game Boy together and fasten all of the appropriate screws. The custom Super Famicom shell that I ordered off of eBay came with stickers. I've got a Nintendo sticker and an informational back of product sticker. Now obviously this step is optional, but I want my Game Boy to look as authentic as possible. And as our last step, you guessed it, reinsert the battery back into its housing. Now this is the moment that I've been waiting all night for, the culmination of all of my hard work. It was time to turn on my brand new Game Boy Advance SP.
The battery's dead.
So after a quick recharge, this is the final result.
Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you're new to the Game Informer YouTube channel, be sure to hit subscribe and that like button, and leave a comment down below if you're planning to build your own. And if you have any questions, let me know and I'll do my best to either point you in the right direction or answer it myself. Overall, I was a little intimidated to pull apart my own Game Boy Advance SP, but it saved me a lot of money in the long run compared to sending it off to somebody else to mod or to buy a modded Game Boy outright. So I did it myself, and I gotta say, as somebody who has very little experience with pulling apart things that are not meant to be pulled apart, it was fairly easy. And I'm honestly like super excited with the end result. The IPS screen is a game changer, and if you're wanting to get into modding Game Boys or whatever retro hardware, I think this is a great place to start. It's a complex enough build that you kind of have to understand the basics and fundamentals, but it's not too challenging that it can't be your first console that you mod. If you're interested in modding your own Game Boy Advance SP, I highly recommend it.